you made it seem like a real relationship. And I
Um,
was like, what do you
what?
mean? And they're like, oh, well, you just, you made it seem like it could be like real, this marriage between two men. I was really shocked. I was like, what do you mean this isn't a real relationship? What do you mean? Are you saying that only heteronormative is the only relationships that can happen?
Wow.
I wanted to write this show in which you didn't even think about the fact that they're two women, because it's very important to me that the audience is just reveling in the beauty of this relationship. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of writers, making sure there's authenticity and pushing for, writing a character from a full place and not writing from a place of a story you're trying to make work, or a certain kind of trait or something, which is, puts out a thin character that,
A
um, you
stereotype
know,
or
or a stereotype,
yeah.
Welcome back to Real Relationships. I'm Cheryl Muir, and we're joined this week by the incredible writer Crystal Skillman. Crystal is the writer of an incredible play called Open, screening at Edinburgh Fringe Festival. By the time you see this, it will have stopped screening, so hopefully you're joining us for a bit of a post-match analysis here. Crystal's also written for Marvel Comics. I know, it's the absolute coolest. And she's also written a lot of plays and a lot of musicals like Geek and King Kirby. If you love the theatre, you're really, really going to enjoy this episode, so let's get into it. And I do apologise for the noise in the background. The gardener's next door and he's trimming the hedges. What can I say? This is real life.
Crystal, welcome to Real Relationships. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. I'm so excited about our conversation today. We're here to talk about your play Open, which is going to be screening at Edinburgh Fringe Festival. What I'd love to start with is really talking about your experience and your career in the arts, but specifically how it's helped you to heal and to accept yourself more and be more of who you are. How has your career in the arts helped with all of that?
It's so healing and cathartic to, to write, but at the same time live through a character, and also look at the characters you're putting out into the world in terms of how an audience connects to them. So I think, in particular in theater, there is this really incredible growth that you're doing alongside a live audience.
Yeah.
Each piece that you write in theater, you there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee it's perfect. There's no guarantee it's a living, breathing piece. And that's why playwrights often write over time, or you'll see and hear Tony Kushner rewriting Angels in America a million times, because it's never really done. So I think
Mm.
that there's something, as you what's and I write a lot of coming of age work, and a lot of coming of age at any age in my stories, especially as a woman. And I find that in theater, that's a little bit what I'm doing as an artist. Because I started, you start, or everyone starts at a different age, but I started in the visual arts at Parsons School of Design with photography in my teens. I had a theater background, and then I took a playwriting class, and I got really bitten by the bug. And so I was doing that in my early 20s. I think I'd only been writing in this group called Youngblood at EST for about a couple of years before I was viewed by the Times for a
Wow.
short play. And then I was in the public eye, and then I was learning out loud. So that's why I think my career has this very interesting, like, every 5 years you're like, there's these set of plays that she did. And I
Yeah.
think partly it's that I'm kind of growing up as a person, as a human, and development of my work, and sharing that with an audience.
Beautiful. And how much of yourself do you put into your characters?
Oh, and I think every great writer, almost
Yeah.
every part of them is all in there. Um, I write very driven women, and they're all, different, but it's really exciting to work with my team, because I don't believe in likable or unlikable. I believe in
Mm.
people going strongly after what they want and desire, and then what is the consequence of that, and what is also the reward of that, and how does that change, and so I do think it's really interesting when talking about strong female characters. It's
Ask
really
about that.
interesting. It's really interesting to um uh you know to realize it's me, because I'm very driven, and I'm very passionate, and I've given my whole life to this. My husband's also a writer, so it's a house of writing all the time, and that brings me joy. And honestly, that saved me in our recent times of the pandemic,
Yeah,
because I just I just jumped into writing, into fiction. I was like, well, if real life doesn't make sense more than ever, I'm
yeah,
just gonna live in the fictional world
yeah.
where I can explore the themes that we're dealing with, but in a way that I think can provide audience um, more help than I see in the outside world currently.
Mm. Absolutely. And it can be a place of escapism. And I've certainly used the arts for that, but it can also be this really healing, cathartic place where we can make sense of what's happening when it might be a bit difficult to do it personally and internally. Instead, we can look at these characters that we relate to and see ourselves in them, and maybe sometimes even, I know for myself, project my pain onto them and feel so much empathy for what they're going through, when actually what they have gone through may have been similar to my own journey. So I love the arts for that. You believe in the arts and activism. What is it
I do.
about the, yeah, and so do I think that's so beautiful. The arts is such a powerful vehicle for change. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because whether it's a film, audio drama, podcast, which are really kind of flipped niche terms of the same thing in a lot of ways. Theater, any art form, if there isn't change in the story, there's not really a lot for the listener.
Mm,
Then again, there's comfort in going to a place that never changes. Like, like Night Vale has changed within it, but also there are things that do stay the same. So I think any dramatic arts story, told in the dramatic arts, is exploring change. And
mm,
so because of that, it helps prepare an audience. I think a lot about how I have a very specific technique for the ending of my plays, and it takes a while to refine, but I'm actually preparing the audience to go back into the world. So I think a lot about, as opposed to, this was a story that I saw, and now let's go get drinks and talk about it. I'm thinking a lot more about how the ending, honestly, like in some way, kind of reaches out to you, takes your hand, and is with you, like you can't avoid it. It's like in you. And so therefore you're thinking, gosh, the love of these two women is uh the love of my grandparents, the love of my mother and father, the love of throughout the history that's always been there, the love of maybe a relationship between nine people, the love of, and so you're starting to, either you already were fighting for LGBTQ rights, and you're like, this is a gift to you, saying this is why we're doing what we're doing, or possibly you're someone who really never saw it quite this
mm,
way, and then you're like, maybe then if I talk to somebody about this play or these feelings or this experience, then maybe I can help someone within my family who doesn't quite see it this way. So it's about the ongoing conversation. And Rain and Zoe, probably Save the World, which is a climate change play about two teenage activists that steal a motorcycle, and they go across country following a pipeline. And it looks like it just got optioned, and we know it's going to be done in the spring. I wish I could talk more about it, but
I'm
it
so
might be.
excited to hear more about that towards the time, nearer the time.
I'll just say it might be closer. It might be in the UK region, so it might be
Well, that's
closer to
very
you.
exciting. Congratulations.
Yes, yes. So I can't really chat about it, but hopefully soon we'll be in touch about
Yeah.
that. But that play at the end, and I'm working on it. You're just watching these teenagers, like, how are they gonna,
Mm,
every single part of the hero's journey has come their way, and the moon talks, and there's wolves, and I mean, it's intense stuff, and it's true to life. They are not successful entirely in what they wanted to succeed and do. And obviously, being a climate change activist is very intense, because you
yeah.
wake up any activist, right? Because you know you can't do it all. You can't. It's
Mm,
impossible. Every day is an action. Every day you have to wake up. And honestly, I think being an activist is a little like accepting failure consistently, and that's a part of it, because it's not going to be fixed tomorrow. It's very small steps and about community. So I knew that they would say, let's try again at the end. And it wasn't until I was in a workshop that I realized, well, what if they look out and start counting the audience? What if they somehow involve them? And it's a very cathartic moment. A lot of people cry when it happens because, you know, another thing I'm trying to do for the audience is make them understand that healing sense of, it's okay. It's okay. It's hard. It's okay that you're struggling. It's okay that you don't have all the answers. And there are two kinds of theater, I think. One is the theater that tells you what you already know, and one is one that asks questions. And so I've always been one who wants to ask questions.
Yeah. There's so much I could pick up on there, Crystal. And I love that you, particularly the part where you were saying you prepare the audience for going back into the real world. I haven't heard that before. Why is that important, to guide them back into the world gradually rather than, lights on, let's go and get drinks?
Well, it's interesting. I've always thought similarly to, I've read some interviews with the author of Fleabag, and she also investigates her audience a lot and like looks at reactions and tests things with them. And the key to it is structure in a lot of ways, and how the pieces of the story land. So at the right time, the audience can kind of receive something unexpected and deeper than they thought that makes them reflect on their own lives. I feel for an audience. They came. I mean, to come to a live experience. I mean, it's made me appreciate even more. I love streaming on demand very, very much because I'm reaching so many people. So that's super cool. But you'll see it from the audience is actually a part of Open. You'll see a little bit of interaction. You'll actually see how that works. So based on the magician doing magic, and of course there's nothing there, it's a magic show without magic, but the more you believe in the magic, you just might see it. And so her interaction with the audience, which is why we had to film it really well. We had 3 cameras. It's a really, we didn't really know this film would be seen on a larger level, but luckily this crew was absolutely incredible. Adventure We Can. So it turned into a gorgeous film, very well shot. So we're lucky because you do have to capture the audience in that, because she'll say, what ball is this? Red, blue, yellow? Oh, blue. Okay, here, catch it. And she'll throw it at the audience, and she'll wait until they catch it. So she teaches the audience how to interact with her and the things she's saying and the story of her lover. So, in the sense of people coming, trusting, sitting, getting there, it's a cave, it's like Plato's cave. And I think, how do you leave the cave? And I think if you go too quickly, it's just another thing. And I'm just a little obsessed with how consumerist, we've all become, and how many choices we have and how many options. And, and I don't think a story should be another thing. I don't think it should be a thing like, oh, I have 5 cups, or I have, I don't think it should be a collecting kind of thing. I mean, you can do that, but I want the piece to be distinct, and these pieces to be distinct, stand on their own, and not just be like, great, wow, I saw this on Broadway, I can check it off my list. I don't want that kind of feeling. I want it that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to make it an experience more than a play. Because it'd be great if you bought the play after. I think that's cool. It's a piece of literature, but it's in theater, you get to do something really special, which is that the piece is living and breathing with you. And how does that change you as a person, or ask you to change? Or if you really, didn't like it, like how does your feelings about it invigorate you in your own life and what you do?
So always coming back to that question of, what does this teach me about myself? What can I take from this? What can I learn and integrate from this? And how can I have this experience in the theatre, whether I'm there in person or whether it's streaming? How can I have this experience, be with this art form, and learn about myself, and not just go, oh, check, I've seen that now, let's move on, let's grab my phone and scroll on Instagram. Let's actually take in the art form and let it marinate and allow it to help me to evolve. That's what I was hearing there.
Yes, absolutely. And especially because we have such a relationship with, and I believe social media can do a lot of good. I actually manage the accounts of King Kirby, which is a podcast and Broadway podcast network, and also Open. And I think it's a great place to have extra content for fans. I'm also very fan oriented, I think, because my husband writes comics, and I was traveling and going to so many Comic Cons in my 20s on as he was signing books and everything. So with cosplayers, with the community, with the fans coming to have their Spider-Man signed, or action philosophers, which he's written. Fred Van Lente is his name. I just got very into that relationship, and I thought it was really special. And I thought, so I think of social media like that. How is it a place where you can go and exchange ideas with other people that maybe are outsiders like you, and you have something in common. But in terms of that relationship between the live and scrolling, even I myself, especially being a social media manager, I get really
Right.
but like this out there, right? That's what's really happening. And so
Yeah.
how do you keep that balance, and how do you keep safe, and then go into the world and take a chance at being unsafe? Actually, both can be unsafe in different ways.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. You touched on Comic Con there. I'd love to talk about fandom for just a second. I was
Well,
going
and
to
you're
cut.
dressed perfectly for it.
So
We
I've
could
got
go
to
right
show up
now.
for you. I was going to talk about Marvel, then I realized Wonder Woman's DC, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Wonder Woman's DC, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I love Wonder Woman.
we can be both. It took me a while actually to embrace both. I thought I could only be one. Like, I've got to be loyal to DC. I'm like, but I really love Marvel too. Now, I read in your bio that you have written for Marvel.
Yes, and my credits are is super interesting because I've mostly done I work in musicals. I write the book of Mary Mac's musical, and I'm on a few others that they're all really exciting. Um, but they call me to do songs. So I've written a song, an evil villain song for Doctor Doom in an alternative universe.
Oh my gosh.
There's in Slapstick, the evil princess has. Honestly, they're usually evil villain songs, and then the artists want to draw, because then you do, like, I don't know, 2 to 3 pages of a musical
Yeah.
number, but they don't know how to do lyrics, or and I actually just book write in musicals, but I do have lyric ability. It's actually really great in this form, because you don't have to set it to music. I mean, like, it would be ideal if we did set it to music and then it was in the back, or you go online and listen to the song. We actually should do that. So I kept getting so Fred's writing, and then all of a sudden he'd be like, my editors want you to write this evil villain song. And I was like, well, how could I say no? And then I started with, because of that, you have to know what's happening in each panel. Like, each lyric has to reflect what's happening in each panel and change. So, and I was watching Fred write for comics so much, and then we ended up working on Adventure Time together, and that's really where I started to understand that wonderful way of storytelling, panel to panel, and how to, like, do a 30-page script and things like that. And then we wrote a webtoon together called Eat Fighter. So all of that was kind of my comic book experience. But in terms of Marvel, it's just it's really exciting to see these characters mean so much to fans, and to see the extra stories that are put out there, like every Friday, these half hours, and then to tell the story of Jack Kirby, who's co-creator of the Marvel Universe. It's exciting because people still know Stan Lee better than Jack Kirby, and so there's a real mission with it. And it's nice because it is about educating an audience too, because many times they're seeing Jack Kirby's characters and they don't really understand, or wearing a T-shirt and they don't really understand who he is. And so getting to tell a story is really exciting, because it really is that story of, it's quite American as well, which is that someone gets all the credit, and you're not aware actually of the origin of something. And that's super important, because like you said, every artist puts themselves into their work. And Jack, is Jewish. He grew up on the Lower East Side. He had nothing. Stan also is Jewish, and that connected them. But and they changed their names. There's a lot of connections between them. But I think the fighting oppression, what it means to be American, what it means to stand for something, was a lot of what Jack Kirby was exploring. And his family actually recently said, the insurgency that happened here is obviously, like, a really disturbing thing, but some people have tried to use Captain America to say that that is a symbolic of their feelings. And the estate of Kirby has been very clear about that is not what Captain America is about, and you're really mentally unwell. Like that's not correct.
Yeah, that's very tricky territory, isn't it? When you go like the source material versus what's happening on screen and the interpretation, and whether or not it's consistent with what the original writer, whether it's Jack Kirby or Stan Lee or whomever it may be from whichever universe, how their material is taken and interpreted. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
I think we have to be very careful of, and I'm obsessed with images, being that I studied photography, and I have to communicate so much through my stories, but also visuals. My work is very visual, and also the social media. I think that relationship. So we know, everybody knows that sometimes you see things that aren't real. What does that mean? And we're living now in a relationship where, with the world, where that's gotten extremely confusing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a matter of, if you're affected by image, a story, like, you really have to take the time to learn about it, and you really have to take the time to figure out your relationship to it, and you don't have all the answers, and you're learning, so you have to educate yourself. And one thing that gives me hope, I was just with a bunch of podcasters last night. Everyone's obsessed with history in a kind of good way, so I think that all of this introspection, I think, is going to not only create great art, but also maybe be in better, more educated conversation, in the long run. Although sometimes, on the airwaves, we're hearing and seeing people that, you're like, wow, what is going on? Where did you come from? Like, how can you even think the things that you think? But it's only discourse and conversation that also is going to help that in the long run.
Yeah, beautifully said. What I'm hearing you talk about there, and the themes I'm kind of pulling from that is responsibility in not just taking what we're spoon fed, but looking into it and looking into the history, whether it's something historical in what's happened in the world, whether it's the origin stories of a character or a film, and really taking that upon ourselves to go, well, hang on, I'm seeing this, but where did it come from? What was the intention of the creator and the writer? You know?
Yes, where did it come from?
Yeah.
We often say, in my house, we often say, pop culture is created. People
Yeah.
made these things. People made the images on your T-shirt that are superheroes that you love.
Yeah.
They had a story, and so it's not a machine.
Yeah.
It's coming from people. So, like, but look into where it's from, and investigate your own relationship with it. It's exciting. And then, what does it make you want to create? I believe everyone is a creator. And I think whatever you do in your life that makes you feel creative, I think absolutely you should do it.
There's a quote I had that I was going to talk about at the end of our conversation, but it feels like a good time to get into it now. I was watching some of your press for the Play Geek, and you said, this isn't verbatim, but you said some version of, through play, we can see a person's soul. So how important is play to you, and how do you bring out that playful side? Is it through your writing? Is it through another medium? Do you do cosplay yourself? What do you used to?
Yes, I watch so many every time I go. The cosplayers have different games. They're fully dressed, and sometimes it's a storytelling game. Sometimes it's just a verbal game. Sometimes, and they're through, and role playing is very similar as well. Role playing games,
Yeah.
and through seeing them work out a story, I think, because we connect, like, a story is such a metaphor and a simile that it really helps articulate and connect you to yourself and other people, because you don't really, it's not very impactful for you if I say I'm sad, but if I say, I'm so sad that I'm crying so hard, I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of tears. You're like, whoa, that's pretty intense. You're really sad. And so it's just, when we make things clear through story, we really understand how we feel and how other people feel. And I think that's the whole cathartic nature of it. So in play, that's why I always say my stuff is dark comedy, because there's a lot of fun, on that, cross country play in Rain and Zoe. Open is extremely funny. It's actually been crafted to be so fun in the beginning that when you're starting to realize we're there because something darker has happened, two things happen. There's one audience, it's really a 50-50 audience. One part of the audience is like, oh wow, we're getting to deeper things, that's cool, like I thought it was really fun, but I really like that. And then the other half of the audience is like, oh man, I just came here for the fun. That was
Yeah.
getting really serious.
Yeah.
Like, but by that point I have them, and so they're kind of married, and so that's a kind of like little structural trick, kind of with a piece, which is what magic shows are. They're basically a really well crafted series of tricks that tell a larger story, usually of and somehow come from the magician, even if you're just picking up tricks for that you've learned online or something. There's a reason why you pick that trick, and usually you're telling a personal story as well, so you're revealing yourself. So the act of magic is play, the act of cosplay is play, the act of writing a play is play.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's endless and fun. And I think that by by doing that with someone else or creating something with them, it just it's a beautiful act. It does show your soul.
Mm.
It really does. It's because it's one thing to talk about something. It's another thing to be an experience with something. And I think you just have to have that experience, in some way.
Yeah, it's powerful. I'd love to talk about Open a little bit more. I know we've mentioned it, but I'd love
Yeah.
for you to let people know what's the premise of Open? What's the storyline?
It's a magic show in which a magician begins her show. But she is pantomiming, and we realize that there's nothing there. And so, but she instructs us that the more we believe in the stories that she's saying, the more we'll see that magic. And we realize she's talking to her lover Jenny quite often in this, and telling the story about her relationship with this woman as these tricks are being performed. Um, when the pantomime is happening, the more we believe in it, the more we're rewarded. All of a sudden, something might have more weight, more of a sound, more of a look. So you actually start to, through using your imagination, see the magical tricks she's doing. And it's everything from hoops to balls to card tricks. And you're feeling like you're really seeing magic, because she is making something magical. And at the same time, she's sharing with you a very magical story of love. And as
Mm.
you realize that she herself didn't feel so open, she's frightened of the world and what could happen, and rightfully so in the times we're living. So as it goes on, you begin to realize that Jenny, is actually in the hospital. And so you're realizing that as she's telling these stories, she has a kind of deeper wish for the audience, and a deeper desire for what they could help her accomplish.
Mm.
And she really is looking for magic, and to help Jenny. The team you're seeing too is all female identifying, so the entire team, which was awesome. That was my first tech with all women, and it was the best tech I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I believe
Um,
that. I believe
it
that.
was so cool. Like, there was like, this doesn't work, and like, okay, let's fix
Yeah.
it. Like, it was just, there was like, there's a lot to figure out in tech. It's not always goes perfectly.
The play obviously focuses on a relationship between two women, a love relationship, romantic relationship. We share a passion with that representation on stage and on screen. Why is it important to you to show two women in a relationship, and what kind of impact can that have on everyone's understanding of sexuality and acceptance?
Absolutely. There's another part, I think, that was in there was something that had happened in the lobby of a show of mine that upset me. And
Mhm.
it was, I'd written a play called Wild, which is about Peter and Bobby, two men, who are committed to each other, but start to have affairs, and they're trying to figure each other out. They're in their 20s, and it all takes place on a beach in Chicago. And I was creating it for this young company, and it was really uh, powerful. And one of the strong story arcs in it is that they are engaged, and that is a part of this, and they've been together for 5 years. And I was in the lobby, and someone said to me, "Oh, I really love, that's a really powerful relationship that they have. You did such a great job." And I was like, "Oh, well, thank you." And they were like, you made it seem like a real relationship." And I
um,
was like, what do you
what?
mean? And they're like, "Oh, well, you just, you made it seem like it could be like real, this marriage between two men." And I was stunned. And this is like a couple of years before Trump. So like really it's like 5 to 6 or something
Yeah.
like that years. I was really shocked. I was like, what do you mean this isn't a real relationship? What do you mean? Are you saying that only heteronormative is the only relationships that can happen?
Wow.
And this isn't like a Bible thumper, or
Yeah.
this was a producer, so a creative producer, just done some really great stuff. So I was really confused, and I was like, I just, that was in my head. And then when the election happened and all these we started to slide here in this country into a
Yeah.
very dark place, I I wanted to write this show in which you didn't even think about the fact that they're two women, because the way it starts is so dynamic and it's already in process, and it's a magic show in which you're involved. So you're not really, we're not talking about those themes. We are living the story of love, which is, and love is the connection of souls, and it's the
Yeah.
connection of people, that should be together. And it's and it doesn't have to be fully committed, and it can be open, and it can be so many things. And so
Mm.
I just wanted to have a play, as opposed to Wild, which did focus very specifically on an engagement, to not even have you think about those things, but understand this woman is becoming who she is because of her relationship with her lover. And isn't that an
Mm.
incredible thing? And
Yeah.
isn't that an exciting thing? And shouldn't she? And there's a very dynamic part in the piece where she talks about her fears, and you realize, my God, this is why she is so hesitant to hold her girlfriend's hand in public all the time and things like that. And she grew up in the heartland, and you kind of, it's she's been so much fun and effervescent and this magician. And then because the persona of Kristen, she puts on a good act as a magician, but she pretty early on tells us she's an amateur, and she's doing it as research for her book. She's a young YA author writing about magic and this magical fantasy. So she really is very real person. And actually, there's a fictional podcast I'm writing in development called The Magician's Magician, which follows the story of Open after the events of this play, and follows after her book was published. But it's very important to me that the audience is just reveling in the beauty of this relationship, as opposed
Mm.
to asking, oh gee, is this, how does this relationship work with me or my beliefs or who I am.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. It sucks you in, um, to either, again, you've already been on board and fighting for LGBTQ rights, or perhaps you've realized maybe you haven't done as much as you thought you could.
Yeah.
um, and especially in terms of times where people are expressing hate very quickly and
Yeah.
intensely in the
Yeah.
outside world without repercussion, it seems to me, and
Yeah.
without yeah. And so I think we also have to teach um, you know people. So I hopefully, my plays are always written for, it could be a little younger, but 13 and up. And I always hope that families come, because
Yeah.
um, even though they deal with some darker things, because I think that it could be educational, and theater can really change lives and change people's hearts.
Mm. I love that. I was speaking to a friend of mine on IGTV a couple of weeks ago, and I'm saying this because you talked about families coming to the show, and it got me thinking about how important it is for younger people to see these relationships, same-sex relationships, and just understand earlier, so that they don't have the perspective of that, creative producer of, oh wow, it's like a real relationship. Well, of course it's a real, like, come on, get with
Yeah,
the program, come on.
come on.
It's 2021, come on, do better.
Yeah, it's 2021.
Even though it was maybe 2014 then, but let's move forward. But I was talking to my friend Mariah, and she was saying that she grew up with two grandmas, and she was expressing a regret. She said, I never spoke to my grandma about her sexuality. I never said, you're bi and I love you and it's okay. I'm like, but as a bi woman, like, I would be so happy that my granddaughter was just like, I've got two grandmas and it's awesome. And I just thought it was so interesting that to her, she's like, I have two grandmas. And that's how it is.
It's
It
absolutely,
was
that's so
beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah, and the fact that, like, because it's, you know in our personalities and our humanness, we are our identities, but we are also so many things
Yeah.
that make up that identity. And so I think what we're seeing now is a lot of writers, making sure there's authenticity and pushing for, writing a character from a full place, and not writing from a place of a story you're trying to make work, or a certain kind of trait or something, which is puts out a thin character that
Or
um, you know
stereotype,
or a stereotype,
yeah,
and we've lived with a lot of those stories. And so it's really exciting um, how audiences are asking for it, and writers are stepping up and also making space. I'm a white woman, and I take that into account. That's why I work in mediums, in several mediums, in podcasting, and starting some television, and plays. But I never want to dominate a theater scene. I'm excited to have my plays done and my musicals done, but we need to make space for all writers and all voices. Like right now, we are going to have on Broadway 8 new plays by 8 Black playwrights. It's really
perfect.
exciting.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and I think that it's important that the community of writers consistently support all writers, especially voices we haven't heard or have been marginalized.
Absolutely. That sounds like a good segue into me asking a question I've been meaning to ask this whole time, which is your t-shirt says strong female character. What does strong female character mean to you? Define that for us, if you would.
Yes, I think a strong female character uh, is driven in some way, even if they're hiding it. They can still be shy, of course, but I think also has deep flaws that somewhere in the story they investigate, which allows us to investigate our flaws. Because the flip side of that is the strength that they bring to the story. Ability to see change, ability to go after change, um, to strive for activism, to strive for larger dreams. I think all of those make very strong female characters, always going after what one thinks is almost impossible. And I think women are able to do so much so quickly on so many levels. I just think our flaws are that we over. Sometimes I feel like, as a female identifying person, that you you extend, you get burnt out.
Yeah.
It can be difficult because of all of those things. Also, of course, motherhood and that relationship. And I've often explored mother-daughter relationships in my pieces. And I think it's because my mom and I had such an interesting relationship where she really was behind me, but also I kind of poked and prodded at her, and she didn't get along. She loved her mother, but she died when she was young, and then I had a grandmother that was very overbearing for my dad, that he
Yeah.
estranged himself from. So I think it's that idea of women in your family. How does that work? What is that joy and that love? What is the hardship?
Yeah.
What is so investigating women going after what they want, and how they change, and they change the world, but also how they discover maybe things they need to um, learn themselves, and keep trying. I mean, I think women are so good at bouncing back, and I think that's why. I mean, Wonder Woman's a great example. I mean, Wonder
Mm.
Woman couldn't be one of any more incredible to me. Like, she's just such a strong character, from the Amazons and from
Mm.
the island of the Amazons, and
Warrior. Yeah.
warrior. But she's quite vulnerable, and of
Yeah.
course they always play with that in her relationships, because it's she's so busy. So what does that mean to try and spend a
Mm.
personal time with someone? So it's a really lovely relationship. And I feel like what I love about DC and Marvel so much is that in DC, we think less about Wonder Woman's alter ego, because it's really written that you connect more with Wonder Woman. In Marvel, you connect just as much, or maybe even more, with their civilian personality. So
Oh,
Spider-Man's a great example. You think just as much about Peter Parker as you do about Spider-Man.
that's such an important nuance. I hadn't caught that consciously, but now you say that, I can completely see how that plays out and how they play with that.
And it's fun for the female superheroes in that sense too, and looking at
Mm.
those female identities, because it's just interesting. Like, one is wearing the warrior on the outside, and one's wearing the warrior on the inside. So it's kind of interesting.
I love that. I'd love to finish off with our two. Well, I wouldn't like to finish off at all. I'd love to talk to you all day, but I will finish off with our two real questions. The first one is, how would you define a healthy relationship?
I believe in always being able to communicate what you want, even if words fail you, even if you don't know exactly how to do it, and that someone supports you and wants to hear that and lift you up, but also, you know, it's great to talk about dreams, but also when you're in a relationship together, you have to figure out the practicality of those dreams together. So you have to support each other. But, I love Motivational Monday, and I love all these like, go for your dreams. And it's true. But then how does that happen? I mean, there has to be some. So I think in terms of a relationship, there's someone helping you come into yourself and come in and help the things that you want to bring into the world, and you help them. And I think there's that relationship, and you have to be able to say things that hurt you. You have to be able it usually doesn't happen all in one moment if you have an argument, but like over time, just that openness and non-defensiveness. I mean, that's what you're really looking for. um, and and absolutely, your partner can make mistakes, or partners can make mistakes, and you make mistakes, but that you can come and look at them over time, and there's a bigger investment in this, not like a play, like that it's growing, that it's becoming something. um, and you don't always have the answers, and they don't always have the answers, and you have to have the humility to admit that maybe you're wrong, or couldn't foresee something in a certain way, or had a preconception that is changing. And you have to listen when your partner says, you really hurt me, that really hurt. It doesn't matter if you can't see it or understand it exactly, like, I don't get it, like, what, and it takes time to understand, because the languages, we're such different humans, that the languages take time. You're investing in a relationship that might be long, and so it may take a little bit of chipping away to do that. And you want to make sure that you have your own joy, and you enjoy your relationships, and that is your own relationship. You don't have to prove it to somebody else. I also think that's a big deal, is like, the relationship that you have with your partners or partner is not there to prove something. uh, it's there for you, it's there for your life. It does, so you don't have to justify anything. You just be who you are, and be with people who support being who you are.
Crystal, that feels like the perfect note to end this on. Thank you so much for your time. It was amazing to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.